I wanted to thank Cassie for inviting me to be here. It's really great to be chatting with any size group. I actually do kind of like small groups because we can kind of chat more about things on a more intimate level, which is great. And I also want to kind of put this out there that like everything I'm talking about today is more around like my personal story, my take on things, and not so much on like where I work, which is Google. It's not like their take at all. This is just my opinion. But yeah, hello everyone. My name is Richard. I am a software engineer at Google, and I've been there for a little bit over 3 years now. I have worked on the Google Maps team for most of my time there, and currently I'm on the iOS Google Maps team where I help develop features that help users search and explore the area around them. So that's kind of what I do now. And I guess to kind of start off, I was thinking about, who might be attending this type of thing. And like, these types of sessions, I feel like people might be interested in software development or maybe UX work or, product work or really anything. There's like people go a vast different number of ways. And even though I'm a software engineer, I think that there are certain things that are very specific to that role that I could talk about. But zooming out a bit more, I think it's probably more important to discuss like what is like failure and how you can actually use that to become better at what you're doing. So the way I like to go about this is like, if I think about my career, I feel very lucky to be at Google. I recognize that it's a very coveted job and a lot of people dream of being there. And I personally feel like a lot of luck helped me get there. But I definitely don't think that I was always ready for this. Like, I started doing computer science stuff in college and a little bit late too. And I think through a series of failures and feeling like I was behind, I actually rose up to the challenge and furthered myself to become, capable of working somewhere like I do right now. So if you'll indulge with me, I'm going to zoom back to freshman year, where I had no idea what I wanted to do. All I knew is I liked math, I liked science, I liked engineering. But I didn't have a major. I was undeclared engineering going to university. And I decided to do electrical computer engineering because that seemed like kind of interesting to me. And the dean at the time promised it was like a very lucrative career. So like, okay, I'm about that. That's fine. But my first coding class, actually, I was late by a semester. So I felt so behind compared to the other students. And the way that I kind of fixed that or tried to fix it was during the winter break while people were relaxing and spending time with their families. I was doing that, but also taking like the MIT free classes online and learning coding on my own and using Codecademy to help learn Python. And through those things, like I still felt behind. So I was bullish enough to go try to find an internship my freshman year, which I didn't know if it was a typical thing or not. And I randomly found this posting from a local company in my college town from a few years back. So not even a recent posting about their internship program. And because I couldn't find any more information, I literally walked like 40 minutes because we didn't have Uber at the time. I just walked to their office and was like, hey, do you have internship positions? I don't know what I'm doing, but I would love to work here. And I think they didn't know what to do, or they were just impressed that I walked there or whatever, but they did offer me an interview and I was able to do well enough to, snag an internship spot for that summer. And do I think that I added a ton of value to that company? Not really, honestly. I just learned so much and I'm really grateful that they took me on board. And I think that kind of like, helping out the people who are next in line is something that I'll really take to heart, and I try to do now anyway. I'm really appreciative of that company. So freshman year, I was behind and I felt, I needed to catch up. So I did an internship and I studied on my own, and I kind of did. But then come sophomore year, I was like, okay, let's try to get maybe a bit more of a more difficult internship, more prestigious company, if you will. So I applied to one and I got interviews. I got to the final round, except I didn't know how to do technical interview at all. I didn't know what time complexity was. I didn't know what big O was, any of these things. And I failed it and I didn't get the role. And again, I felt this same feeling that like, oh crap, I'm not, good enough. I don't have the skills, or I feel behind. So that same week, and I actually went back to my LinkedIn to confirm this, the exact same week I applied to get a research position. Again, I just walked where I needed to go. I went to the department office and was like, hey, is there any opportunities for me to practice my coding and work with people? And they said, yeah, we have research opportunities. Some professors are looking for some, undergraduate coders. So here's a list and go talk to them. And I was, again, fortunate enough that someone was willing to take me on. And I learned so much about more advanced algorithms and presenting about, my findings and my research. And again, I failed something. And because of that, that fueled me to find another thing to replace it. Then junior year, very similar story. I had the opportunity to interview at some of the bigger companies, like, your standard big four, big five. And I botched those because I still, for some reason, did not understand how the technical interview. Um, and I, again, kind of panicked. So what did I do? I actually went back to the company I failed my sophomore year, got that internship, fortunately. And I also supplemented that with going to more hackathons and doing my own projects. Like, I actually figured out hackathons were a thing my junior year. I had no idea they existed. I still remember going to my first hackathon, which was Boilermake at Purdue University, walking in the arena and being like, what is this? This is insane. How is this even a thing? This is so crazy. Like, this is the most nerdy thing I can possibly think of, but it's also great at the same time. And just remembering that experience and not winning anything and being like, I want to do this more. And I did like 5 or 6 more hackathons that year. And I got adept enough at this idea of iterating quickly, presenting something, that I was able to make some pretty impressive projects for a student and win some hackathons. And those ultimately helped me later on when I was interviewing for companies like Google. I could talk about my projects and they were actually pretty impressed by them. So then come senior year, I feel like things finally clicked a bit more because I had my good LinkedIn all ready to go, my resume ready to go. And I had all these experiences now that I got through failing other things. And Google actually reached out to me before I even had the chance to apply to them. And I thought, like, wow, finally things are clicking. Wrong. I failed like 3 interviews right off the bat. I thought I was done with Google, like, completely. But for some reason, they saw something in me and they decided, hey, we want to move you into the NRES pipeline, which the engineering residency program, for those who don't know, is a training program at Google for college grads who will train kind of for about a year and rotate on different teams, then eventually convert to full-time if they do well enough. We're going to put you in that pipeline. And that was like the final wake-up call. I was like, this is the last chance I'm going to get. I need to study. Like, I need to really like understand this material. And I locked myself in a room for like 2 weeks and did nothing but like the homework I needed to do and studying for these interviews. And I finally found success. And from then on, I did well enough in the interviews that I was lucky enough to get, after a very long process, land an offer with the NRES program. And that's how I kind of got into Google. And from the other side of things, now that I work at Google, I think a lot of people think like, wow, you must have been amazing in college, or you did all these crazy things. And perhaps some of those things were really impressive to other people, but I only did them because I failed at other things and I felt so behind, like kind of like that imposter syndrome. Like, I didn't feel like I belonged there. So I did things to make myself feel like I was qualified enough. And I think that no matter what you do, if you're doing software engineering or PM work or UX work or really any field, like taking failure or taking this imposter syndrome feeling and using that as fuel to make yourself be a better version of yourself in whatever you're doing can be really, really, really impactful. And I also think that it shows that I didn't become qualified to work at Google overnight. It took many separate things to get there. I would not have gotten my interviews if I did not have my junior year internship, probably. And I wouldn't have gotten that internship if I didn't have prior experience doing research. And I wouldn't have gotten that position probably if I didn't have a robust amount of coding experience from a freshman year internship, right? So like, it's like a chain effect that you take these little opportunities and they become bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's how you end up with these like really impressive things at the end of the day. And I'm hoping to continue that forward at my career at Google, or no matter where I go, just doing bigger and better things, if you will, right? So yeah, I think that using failure can be a really powerful tool. And if you feel like you're behind, like maybe you've listened to all my story and like, oh, I haven't done any of these things and I'm a junior or I'm a senior, like I felt that exact same way. And I only now realize like I did things in the past that really do help me, and everyone has their own path to success. So you don't have to follow my path. And in fact, I would encourage you to not do it because it was very stressful. I would encourage you to find your own path and incrementally build yourself up to get to whatever your version of success is. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Wow, thank you for that insight. It was very crazy to hear your journey going down that way.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I can imagine many students here, and also like those who might watch the recording later, who will share that experience with you, where like it's a lot of stress and not knowing what to do, because like a lot of people come into computer science not knowing anything about it or having some prior background experience. And
Yeah,
so
I know. Go ahead. No,
No,
sorry,
no,
it's fine.
it's okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, I know several of the people from my school who I know that are doing very well in like the industry right now. Like some of them had a lot of coding experience going to college and they were really good. And I was always just so impressed and was like, I'll never get to that level. And then other people I know that are doing equally as well started coding even later than I did. And they just found opportunities and incrementally worked on them. And that's how they got to where they are. So I think it's really never too late. The earlier the better, obviously, but like it's really never too late.
Yeah, that's especially helpful during like the peak interview times right now that many people are applying for internships. So it's really important that we were able to hear someone with experience and also like certain experiences going into that to share their story. And now we're going to get into the main panel questions. So these are questions that were kind of like provided originally from DSC just to get just to get the ball rolling in terms of like asking questions and starting to get responses. But feel free to definitely submit your questions. There is a Slido link in the chat. And for those who didn't get it the first time, I just, pasted it again. So definitely ask questions. You can submit as many as you want, and hopefully we'll get to them in time. And in the later portion, like if we're done with the main panel questions and also the submitted questions, perhaps maybe for some people, if they want to use voice chat, you can also do that because of our small group here attending the panel today. So we're going to start with the first panel question, which is, what's your favorite and least favorite thing about your job?
Okay. So just to get some clarity, do you mean like what's my favorite thing about like being a software engineer at Google or just being a software engineer in general? Because I think they're like different.
It could be either one, like whichever one you want to answer, or answer both if you want to.
I think that the least favorite thing will vary depending on where you do the work, but my favorite thing about just being a software engineer in general is this idea of like I have the power to make change in a variety of ways to various parts of the world. Like so if I work in healthcare, I have a large ability to impact like how medical records are sent or how scans are done or the efficiency of things just through using my fingertips and a keyboard, right? Like that's pretty powerful and I really think that's a really cool thing that wasn't around 100 200 years ago, right? At Google specifically, being a software engineer, especially on my team, I think that's something a lot of people take, well, something that I take for granted sometimes until I remind myself is that I really value having a positive and inclusive workspace. And even though we're all work from home right now, like every single member of my team is a respectful, positive person. And I can go to work without having to worry about like office politics or having to worry about like, a weird encounter with this one other person, right? And I think not having to worry about these like small things like really lets me focus on my job and really give that my all and like want to do my work. So something that I occasionally do take for granted, but definitely the biggest thing that I appreciate about my job. Least favorite thing I'd say is probably with any big company, development times can be a bit long because there's a lot of process involved. You have products that are very established. So before you make any changes to them, that has to go through a pretty lengthy review process usually. And that can be a little bit fatiguing, just having to deal with a lot more process than actually like coding things up and sending them out the door. But I don't think that's a Google specific problem. I think that's a large company problem in general.
And for experiences as a student compared to being a professional in the tech industry now, what are some important tips that you want to provide for students? And I know that you mentioned failure earlier, but what other factors do you think contribute to your success that you hope for many students to apply to their own personal life?
I think the other big thing that many students don't realize until it's too late is prioritization. And it's a thing that, especially as a software engineer, that's like one of the things that I work on all the time, like prioritizing, which features I'm working on or which bugs I'm working on or who I'm talking to or like what tasks I need to do. Because there's an endless list of things I could be doing for work, but I need to pick the ones that make the most sense given the timelines I have. And as a student, right, you ultimately I think most students fall into this bucket of having the goal that at the end of their college, time, getting degrees, whether it's bachelor's, master's, PhD, they want to come out of it with a job at the end of the day that's able to provide them income. And I think a lot of students just go through school thinking the goal is to get the degree and then the job comes after. But especially in the tech industry, that is possible, but much harder to do. It is much easier to get a job lined up before you graduate. And I think a lot of students fail to prepare themselves to get that opportunity. So for example, if you're a senior or 1 year away from graduating, you are eligible for new grad positions at a lot of companies. That interviewing process usually starts around the fall time. And I think a lot of students don't realize that, and they get the degree and then they're like, wait, where's the job? And it's so much harder to get. So prioritizing your time to make sure you're ready for the application window, prioritizing your time to make sure you're ready for the interviews that come after it, is huge. Something that I am very fortunate that I caught on to at the last chance possible when I was a student, but I've also seen many of my peers in school not quite get that. And it's been a lot harder for them. They're still able to find success usually, but it's just the battle is much harder to win.
And for you personally, maybe during your time as a student compared to now, what were your greatest challenges as a student and as a professional, and how did you overcome it? It could be like your work or maybe like something more like personal life in terms of like maybe habits.
Well, I'll start by saying that I feel fortunate enough that when I was in school, I didn't have to worry about financial things or like having to take care of my family because they're ill or unable to work or anything like that. I recognize that some students are, and that is a very, very challenging and impressive feat to be able to balance all those things. And if that is your personal challenge, then like I commend you and salute you, and I wish you all the best with that. When I was a student, I think my personal challenge was this prioritization thing. I'm the type of guy who likes to get involved with as many things as I could in college. So I got involved with philanthropy and ski and snowboarding club and triathlon club for a while, and ACM and IEEE, and then doing a triple major and like all these things, right? And it really made it difficult to give a single thing my all and give it the attention it deserves. I think that was a huge challenge for me, especially during senior year when I was trying to figure out my jobs. And the way I kind of mitigated that was I ultimately had to prioritize. I had to be like, I love this philanthropy that I'm a huge part of, but my job is more important to me. And I need to get that first. I need to take care of myself first, and then I can take care of other people. So I took a bit of a backseat from that for a little bit to get a secure job. And then I was able to resume the work. As a professional, I think it's a bit of a different story. A big challenge that I see as well as a lot of my friends who are also now in the industry, the thing that they uh, have to deal with is like, what's next, right? When you're in school, throughout your entire life, it's like when I'm around 18 or whatever, I'm going to graduate high school, and then when I'm around a certain age, I'm going to graduate college. Like it's like 4 years or 5 years, right? Maybe if you're doing masters or whatever. But there's always a time bounding box of when you're kind of supposed to be done, and that's the goal. But once you join industry, it's like, what's next? Like, sure, you can get promoted, but like, what is the new end goal? When does the time box end? So it's figuring out kind of, if like figuring out what that looks like or what the short-term goals are, and kind of going from there. And you can feel very lost. But I think that short-term goals are a good way to keep yourself on track, because I don't know what's going to come for me 10, 15 years from now, honestly. I have no idea, but I know it's going to come like 2 years from now, and I'm working towards that. And then once I'm there, I'll panic a bit more and then figure it out from there.
Yeah, it's kind of hard because throughout like high school and like younger education, we always have like years of when we're going to graduate. But for work, it's like, well, when do I want to leave or when to leave? So
Mhm.
it's really hard to kind of figure that out too. So some people get stuck at companies for years, or they just leave after like a few months.
Yeah.
And if you were to go back in time, if you wanted to, what was something that you would have done differently as a student? Or would it be the same outcome?
Um, I think, again, I got very lucky. So would I be okay with the same outcome? I think so. But I would definitely do things differently. Again, I took on a lot of things as a student, and I don't think all those things were worthwhile. I think there's value in trying things, but there's also value in knowing when to quit them. Um, so some of these clubs that I was a part of, I joined because people, like, oh, you might like this. Let's try this out together. And it was fun, but ultimately was not worth my time. And I wasn't able to give good time to that club as well, right? I also triple majored. If you have a really strong passion for multiple things, that's great. But I probably could have turned my music major into a minor just to save myself some time and some headache. Um, it's things like that, like basically giving myself more time. And also, as happy as I am that was able to land a job at Google, it wasn't easy, and I think I could have made that process a lot easier by understanding what technical interviews were before my senior year, doing more hackathons earlier on. But these were things I just did not know about. So now that I have the knowledge that I do, I wish I had known that earlier. Um, so yeah.
All right, and the last main panel question is a little bit repetitive, so we're going to skip that and kind of start on the audience submitted questions. So thank you so far for your insight. It's really different from a lot of stories that many people hear. It's a very non-linear path, like it's a EV or something. So for the first panel submitted question by Anonymous, why did you choose this career path and what do you enjoy most about your job at Google? I think you kind of answered the second part, so maybe you can answer the first part.
So if I were to be brutally honest, like I started the career path again because my very friendly department chair, electrical and computer engineering at Iowa, walked into our engineering success seminar and gave a presentation about why ECE is so great. And at the end, he showed it like a graph that showed all the other engineering majors, their salaries, and he showed electrical computer engineering, and their salary was way bigger. And I was like, all right, I will start with that one and see how it goes. That's the honest version. But very soon after that, when I started coding that winter break and I felt behind, I was like, this is actually kind of cool. Like, it's really satisfying to like hit the run button and the program does exactly what you want it to do. And like, I remember when I made my first little Python game in the console and I was like, wow, this is so cool. And I was like really excited about it. I was like, this is so interesting. And I want to keep doing this. I want to build bigger and better things. And so what started off as like a very naive money, interest thing turned into I'm actually solving problems, which I like doing, and it's so accessible to anybody. And I have a kind of natural affinity, and I feel like I did pretty well in my classes. So like this is a really good fit for me. I want to see where this goes. So ultimately, I think it's just how accessible the problem solving is and how big of problem you can now solve with it.
And diving into that further, someone asked, how is the software development process handled where you work and what are the steps taken?
So I can't like give super specifics, but in general, at like a larger company, I mean, Google obviously has many products, and I think the process for development for each product is probably different in some way. Some vastly different than others, but some are pretty similar. Um, with any large established product, whenever you make changes, they need to be approved. So, when you submit code, I think having good quality code is important, and we have checks for that. And then whenever you want to kind of launch features or make changes, like larger changes to the product, like there's also an approval process for that. So the short answer is like it takes time and it takes process, but I think that the process is well worth it to ensure that when our users use our products, they're very high quality. Yeah.
And another person asked, what was the first day like at Google, if you remember?
Was my first day like at Google?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is this is embarrassing. I don't know if anyone has ever like traveled or been like on public transportation and like using the map to see like you haven't been to this place before and you're trying to get there. And just like you're on a bus and you see your little dot moving closer and then it moves further away from the location you're supposed to be going to. And you can't get off the bus for a while and you just don't know where you're going anymore. So my first day, I did that because I didn't know which bus to take to get to headquarters in Mountain View. And I was like an hour and a half late getting to work, which is great. So I actually ended up calling an Uber, I think, and I just take me to work. So I was late to orientation. I literally sprinted in, got my security photo taken, and then I just joined orientation. And they just acted like it was normal because it probably was normal. And it was just a day of kind of meeting some other people starting the same day, learning about Google culture a bit more. And it was actually pretty relaxing, nothing too scary at all. I definitely felt like the people around me were very like talented at what they do because they probably were. But overall, besides this rough start, it was just a very like enjoyable, exciting day. Like it made me excited to work at the company.
And the next question pertains to I'm assuming maybe career at Google, career growth. Omar asked, what is internal mobility like at Google, both laterally and upwards?
So I'll talk about laterally first. I this is my opinion again, not speaking on behalf of Google. I think it's a little bit easier to transfer internally because like once you're in Google, like Google knows that you're like I think I refer to Googlers as like strong generalists. Like you could pick me up off of my team and put me on another team, and with some ramp up, I'd probably do pretty well, right? So moving around is easier than like coming in fresh. I think also with that, the higher up it's like certain teams are looking for certain individuals. So like maybe a team is looking for someone who can just independently execute pretty well. So they're going to probably look for someone who's not quite a new grad, but maybe a little bit above that. Or maybe another team's looking for a manager. They're looking for someone a bit higher status, right? So it depends on what the teams are looking for. But usually, like if you were to join Google, I'd say like after you get promoted, like one time, it's probably pretty easy to move around at that point. Um, in terms of moving upward, getting promoted and all those things, with any company, it's definitely possible to do. As it is a large company, like there are pretty standard guidelines for what it takes to get promoted and what your performance should look like. I can't speak into specifics as to what those things are externally, unfortunately, but like you're made pretty well aware once you're at Google, like what is expected of you to be considered at the next level. And there are multiple times in the year for you to kind of not prove that, but I guess make a case for that and have the chance to get promoted. Yeah.
And what would you say about upwards if you didn't clarify that?
Yeah. So upwards is getting promoted basically. So yeah, that's. I mean, there are a few times a year you can probably present yourself as a promotion candidate, and the guidelines at Google are pretty standard for what those are. You're made very well aware of what they are, and if all goes well, then yeah, you get promoted. It varies depending on the person and maybe even the org, like how fast you'll get promoted. Um, I I mean, people have different opinions about it. I think it's like, a right combination of the projects you're doing, but also like the quality of work you're doing and, how consistently you're doing that work and some of these things. But like, that's my personal take on it. I actually don't sit on any like promotion committees because I'm too junior to do that. But I think that once you join Google, you're made, if you're aiming for fast promotion, you can find the information to understand like what it would take to get there.
In addition to career development, Omar also asked about what the steps becoming a TPM.
TPM. So there's a lot of just like with PM is that a project manager? Is it a product manager? Is that a project program manager? Right? It's like TPM is like there are multiple forms of that. From my understanding, TPM is Google Technical Project Manager usually. I guess I can use the word program, but effectively, you're kind of managing um, what's what are the like the requirements for being able to do the technical side of things for whatever project you're on, right? So like, do you have the staffing for maybe what you need to implement this one feature? Maybe it'll take like 3 or 4 engineers, right? Maybe it's a big thing or a big migration. Or do we have the infrastructure available to meet all the requirements for this specific thing? Not every team has a TPM. Some teams have multiple TPMs. Again, it really varies depending on the product, the team, a lot of different things. What does it take? Um, I believe you're able to snag that kind of position fresh from college, but I would imagine it takes a lot of understanding of requirements, understanding how technical systems work, and what it takes to build certain features and like resource management, like whether it's like engineering or like how much QPS are we allowed to have, right? Or like how much are we allowed to incur cost wise on our servers, right? So being able to understand these kind of systems and analyze problems like that. I am not personally a TPM, so I'm not the best person to answer this question, but I would encourage you to go online and just search for like TPM at Google or TPM anywhere, really, and figure out like what actual TPMs are like really necessary to be successful at a job. This is based on my experience with TPMs, so it's a little bit filtered.
And with the current, status of the pandemic that's going on, what would you say to students that are worried about not being hired due to freezes and layoffs during the pandemic? And would you recommend gap years or master programs to students?
Okay. So I am very, I guess I can't empathize because I'm not a student during the time of the pandemic, but I'm very sympathetic to all of you for having to deal with this catastrophe that is COVID-19 while you're being a student, and especially to those who are in that internship / full-time opportunity search. I can only imagine like how stressful that is. And I know, like, for example, there are probably many interns or soon to be interns last summer who weren't able to do that because the pandemic canceled the internship programs, right? So I can only imagine like what that's like. And I really sympathize with that. That is so tough. I think your plan moving forward should probably be pretty similar to what it was before the pandemic, but adjusted with the knowledge that things may slip. So what can you control? You can control if you do side projects. You can control if you learn programming languages on your own. You control the classes you take. Those things you can always put on a resume. I would still say, yeah, shoot for internships and shoot for full-time opportunities, but like it might be harder to snag those. And I hope that kind of like what I talked about earlier, that puts pressure on you, not so much that it makes you feel like, like you can't do anything, but enough to make you feel like to motivate you to like really be the best you can be. Because, you're not really competing with other people for jobs, but you are in a way competing for spots. Usually there's a certain like amount of people they can hire each year. And it's like you want one of those spots, right? So proving that you're worth it and doing things that are within your locus of control, I think would be really a good way to think about the problem. With regards to the master's program, I usually with if you're doing software engineering and that's it, I don't really think a master's program is super necessary. It might be helpful if you're switching from like another engineering discipline to computer science or software engineering, or if you like, I know people who've done like psychology bachelors and then switched to like comp sci masters, right? And they've been very successful in the software industry rather. It's also a good idea, I think, if you really feel like you don't have a lot of experience and it's come like your senior year of college and you feel like you don't have enough experience to like stand out as a candidate for applications and you're not having luck, you can actually do a master's program and then become re-eligible to do internships. Usually a requirement for internships is that after the internship is over, you're returning to school. So by doing a master's, you're actually extending the window for you to do that. And in internships, also they serve two purposes, which is like you have work experience now, and you can also convert usually from an intern to a full-time employee post finishing school. So it makes sense in some scenarios, I think, but definitely not required. I think it's a case by case basis, honestly. What I'd also say there is like, as long as you end up with a job that you're okay with after graduation, Like in my eyes, that's like the goal, right? So I wouldn't weigh the two as like, oh, I need to pick one. The other one is a wrong decision. It's like they're both probably pretty good decisions. It's just like which one is better for you. And if you want to probably pick that one, but if you pick the wrong one, it's probably okay. So don't stress too much.
And what would you say about gap years? For many students that, personally, I know many students that are taking a year off or semesters off from school due to the pandemic.
Mhm. It makes, in my eyes, it makes a lot of sense to consider a gap year at least because like a lot of the benefits of being at university are not available to you, even if you're taking the classes. Like you're not going to get the social dynamic that, you know, college is kind of famous for, which I'm not specifically talking about like, you know, fun and parties and those things. I'm talking about like, you know, meeting other students and collaborating and those things, are like building your network that way. You're not really getting that as much. So like that is taken away from you. Um, and I think that a lot of that like camaraderie and accountability with that goes away too. So it might be kind of harder to latch on to like, you know, wanting to develop things and wanting to further yourself in your whatever profession you're going for. If I'd say the gap year might be worth it as long as you're making use of that time, like better use of that time. So let's say you want to build some really ambitious project, and you think that taking a gap year will give you more time to do that. Then I'm all for that, right? Because that's really increasing your candidacy in the future, whether you know for whatever you want to do, or it's building your skill set more. So I guess the short answer is if you're using the time more effectively, then yes, I think it's a great idea. Um,
All right, well, that seems to be kind of it for the career set of questions. Now I think we're moving on to more student-focused questions on like resources and project ideas. So
mhm.
the next question is, are there any websites, books, programs related to computer science, interviews, or anything that has helped you with your experience in the industry?
Okay. So I personally in my journey, I guess chronologically, I started with Code Academy. At the time, I think this was around late 2013. That was when I was a freshman. That's website really helped me learn Python. I thought it was great. So special kudos to them for helping me on my coding journey. I'm sure by now the website is much more thorough and has a lot of great resources. So I think it's a great tool. Um, in terms of interview prep, for those who don't know, there's a book called Cracking the Coding Interview, written by someone who has worked at several of the large tech companies like Google and I think Amazon and Microsoft and maybe others. I'm sure. I think her name is Gail Lockman McDowell. I might have gotten the name wrong, but I think she has her own company now, which kind of focuses on like career prep in tech. That book is not to be sacrilegious, considered like the coding interview Bible, because it's literally like a really thick book. That's one thing, but also it's like chocked full of like, um, you know, tutorials for each data structure that you might encounter, algorithms you might encounter, and a lot of problems with guided and detailed solutions for those problems and explanations as to how they came up with those solutions. So I think that's a great resource to at least skim and have on handy. I've actually seen people at interview days, like for companies, have the book with them, like reading the book before they go into interview, which is kind of hilarious, but also like a testament of how popular this book is for aspiring engineers. Um, Besides that, I think there are probably many sites that I haven't even used that are new, that are great. In my day, HackerRank and LeetCode were very popular. I'm sure there still are, just to practice more problems and practice typing them into an editor. And I think one resource that's really underutilized, but is a great idea, is if you have friends or if you have friends who are going for tech, or even if you don't, practicing technical interviewing with someone and just rambling out loud your thought process is a really good skill to have, especially when it comes to interviews. Because it's a muscle you don't flex very often. Like chances are when you're coding for a homework assignment or for a project, you're not like talking out loud. You're probably just coding it right silently. So being able to communicate your thought process and your, you know, how you're problem solving in your head and coding that and putting it in code is a kind of gained skill that will serve you super, super well when it comes time to interview.
And before you were offered residency by Google, what were some other career paths that you have in mind? I remember you mentioned that you triple majored at some point.
Yes. At one point in my life, I thought I might want to be a musician of some kind. I played violin for like uh, 10, 15 years before I started college. Not 15, that's too many. Like 13 years probably before I started college. And I played a lot of piano. So like this makes a good sense. I should major in music when I go to college. Um, so I thought at one point, like maybe I'll do something with this. And then what I kind of realized is like either you have to be at the top of your game in that sense, or you have to go into like music ed or music therapy or other paths. But like it just didn't seem as clear to me that that was going to be a good fit. Um, and I also considered chemical engineering at one point because I really liked chemistry in high school. Like I had a teacher who made it very interesting, and I learned so much from her. And I was actually going to major in chemical engineering, but something about coding really made me gravitate towards that more. So maybe in another life, I would have done chemical engineering, something like that. Um, Besides like the Google offer, like I was fortunate enough to receive a few offers at that time of senior year. So I had a few other places I could have gone, but I ultimately did choose Google primarily because of their culture. I was really excited to work at somewhere who kind of boasted this culture of respect and positivity. And I don't regret my decision. Yeah.
And someone asked about the tendency of software development right now. So for example, like cloud computing, machine learning, or anything else. And I think they're referring to maybe what's popular or trending right now for software development.
I think it's kind of a good thing, but there are so many things that are like really popular within the software space. I'll be honest, I'm not the type of person who's like on the cutting edge of what's like super cool in the industry right now. I know of some cool projects, but like I'd say like during my time in college, machine learning and AI was like huge. Like that was the big thing, and also kind of a web. Um, I personally have a bit more of an interest in things that serve users directly. So I'm a front end engineer at Google. I work on iOS development primarily. Um, what are the popular things? I think that security and privacy is always, for a very long time, will be very popular. I mean, you look at any big keynote from big companies that like Apple and Google and all these companies, right? And they'll always have some section about like security and privacy, probably because it's like people care about it a lot, especially when data is becoming such a I guess a hot commodity and people are so sensitive about it. Like it's really important for these companies to address those concerns. Um, so I think there will always be a space for that for a long time. Machine learning and AI, it's a very interesting field, but I think it's also a little bit of a saturated field in terms of people who are interested in it. So if you're interested in those things, like understand that you are going up against a lot of people for positions. That doesn't mean you shouldn't apply or like be interested in it, but like it is very popular for a reason. Um, yeah, I think those are the main ones. But really, like, if it's a matter of you picking which area to go into, I would really try to focus more like what are you personally interested in, what gravitates to you more. Like when I was a student, I was really interested in voice interfaces because those were kind of a new thing at the time. So at a lot of hackathons, I would actually develop Amazon Alexa skills. I developed like 3 or 4 for different hackathons, and I just became pretty proficient at like setting them up, making them work, doing cool things with them. And though one of them was actually a project I talked about in an interview, and I thought it actually was the difference between me getting the job and not, because I was able to talk about how um, all the hookups that I did for it and all the considerations I made in my problem solving process for it. So finding something that you're really into or pretty into and like finding some depth in it will serve you pretty well.
And speaking of projects, what were the projects that you used for your resumes? Like maybe you can compare like different resumes you've had over time and like the kind of projects that you really liked or talked about.
Mhm. I would say that my most impressive project in my eye was one of these Alexa projects. At a hackathon, I built a like I guess kind of a pseudo medication management system with Alexa, where you could basically tell it, I'm going to take this medication for this frequency, and like every like third day for like 3 weeks, right? And then you could ask Alexa like, what meds should I take today? And it would tell you back like, oh, you need to take this, and you could also mark some of them as completed and those things, um, all within like a 48-hour window. And I had a team of 2 other people helping me with it. That one was, I think, the most fun, the most interesting one. But I also had like a few class projects on there occasionally when I didn't have anything else to talk about. Um, I did something with like, I did a Chrome extension, I think that was around content filtering, where someone created like a filter to, filter out a specific person, based on the political climate. I'm assuming you can guess who that might be. And I kind of made it more customizable as just like a little side project. I thought that was pretty interesting to learn about how Chrome extensions work. And some iOS apps occasionally, just some small things that I never released, but just like projects I had on GitHub. So short answer is like a combination of class projects and hackathon/side projects. And I replaced the ones that were kind of older, less impressive with ones that were newer and more meaty and impressive as I done them. So.
And as for networking, how would you go about networking or building relationships if you aren't from a school that's well known for STEM programs?
So I can relate to this question because I feel like I was in this boat throughout my entire college time. It is challenging, especially when your school isn't probably as well known for being in the industry that you want to go into. I think if you have opportunities like for example, if this is like a small group and you attended this chat and you want to connect with me, like I'd be happy to like chat for a little bit and like get to know you and like help answer any questions you might have offline. So definitely feel free to connect with me. But if you have the opportunity to meet other people in the industry, like taking that time to connect with them and hearing their story and asking them questions and gaining insight from them, chances are if they're like me, they've made a lot of mistakes and they don't want other people to make the same mistakes. So you can learn a lot from people, who've been there and done that, I guess. Going to hackathons. I know they're all virtual now, which is really unfortunate, but I met a lot of people and recruiters at hackathons that have helped me improve my resume, that have helped me learn how to do certain things in coding languages that I didn't know I could do, that have really kind of pushed me to build better, bigger and better projects. So I think hackathons are a really great way to do that. Hopefully they can resume being in person again. But if not, I'm sure the virtual alternatives are doing their best to kind of foster the same environment. And then your peers at school, I think they're a really great resource to lean on, and you can kind of all help each other develop, I guess pun intended, into better versions of yourself, whether it's an engineer or a product manager or whatever role you want to be. I said earlier that there's like, there are spots for, positions, but it's not so much of like spots. I think it's more of like, it's more of like a quota, I guess, in a lot of companies. Like we can hire this many people, right? And chances are there's a spot for every single person at your university to be there. So it's just a matter of like, you don't have to compete against each other. You're more of like co-working together to build each other up. I think that network is one that I did not leverage super well at my university, and I also regret that. I wish I could have done better about that.
Yes, and for those who are who didn't know or wasn't able to attend, 2 weeks ago we had a networking workshop where we provided a lot of like nice tips and also advice for how to network with people that are might be strangers, your classmates or alumni. So we have that video on our YouTube channel, and we can post it in our Slack later for those who didn't get to see it. And it's really, really important for everyone to network because I would say that a lot of the times it really helps you get through like your foot through the door in some cases. When applying, like you don't want to just be someone who applies, but rather someone who stands out. And so like definitely check out like ways to network with other people and how to talk to university recruiters.
Yeah,
And
I
so
think
as we're
a
Go
lot of
ahead.
like myself included as a student, I didn't think networking was that important, and I feel very lucky that I got through the door somehow without doing too much of it. That being said, now that I'm on this side, I wouldn't view networking as like something you don't need to do. I would view it as something that will help you. Like if you don't network, you could be fine. But if you do network, it will help you. So why not network? Like it's just going to help you. So for people who think it might not be as important, do not follow my example and like go meet people, go interact with people, make friends, make colleagues, those types of things. It'll really help.
And as we're getting near the end of the interview, it's 12:40. So for those that need to go, you're able to go. But then I think we're also gonna have like a little bit of time after just to like any questions that you had, or like some voice chats if you want to, use your voice to ask or comment on anything. So if anyone like wants to say anything, you can raise your hand and then I'll call on you. Okay, maybe not. I did kind of want to also, oh, I think I got like frozen for a bit. What is some advice that you can give to students who are still currently applying to internships now?
So one thing that I think is a helpful way of thinking about this internship or interviewing game is, it might feel frustrating when maybe you don't, maybe you get a rejection letter, or maybe you get an interview and you don't do one, then you get the rejection letter. You only need to get one. Like this is not a thing where like I need to get 10 internship offers, right? Like you really only need to get one and then you're good. So if you get a rejection letter, just remember, like, just keep going until you get that one, and then you'll be set. For those who are doing it right now or considering doing it, I would say like it's free to apply to companies. So it's well worth the time to just like fill out, make your resume look good, make your LinkedIn or website look good, and then just apply. And then you'll have some time to, study for interviews and all those things. But I would encourage you to cast your net wide, like apply to as many as you can. Because, if you put all of your eggs in like one company's basket, that might not pan out. And that would be really unfortunate, right? Because at the end of the day, like maybe my dream was to work at Google, but that was not my first company that I worked for technically. I worked for like 3 other ones before that, right? So you can eventually get to where you want to be, even if that might not be right now. You just have to be a little bit patient. And I would encourage you to think of interview prep as well as applications and resume, all this stuff as like a class you're taking. Like give it the time that it deserves, because it, unfortunately, I'm not sure about your university, but like a lot of universities they have career prep and they have some sessions, but they don't like they don't emphasize like the importance of like having to get a resume and do all this interview prep, because many of them are kind of just general like engineering, this is what you should do. But I think that software especially is very specific. So I would literally treat it like in my school, like 3 semester hours is a standard class. I would treat like a 3 semester hour class and like study for things and make your resume look good. And it will really, really take you a long way, because it does deserve that time. And if your goal is to come out of university with a job, like you need to invest time in there too. So yeah.
Thank you for that great advice. I think that time management is definitely one of the key things to success, and especially with us being like computer science majors or people who want to go into tech, it's very important to really set that time aside and have self-discipline to manage everything. And so I think this is the end of our panel. So thank you so much, Richard, for joining us and like sharing your stories and insight and advice to everyone. Does anyone have any like comments or like anything they want to say? Okay, so this will be the end of the meeting and I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much for being here.